For 200 years, the galaxy believed humanity had abandoned the planet of Erebus 7. No distress signals. No trade requests. No military transmissions. Nothing. To every star map in the galaxy, Erebus 7 was nothing more than a forgotten at the edge of explored space, a failed human colony that had disappeared into silence. But the galaxy was wrong. Because beneath the frozen mountains, beneath the empty cities, and beneath the quiet fields where humans lived simple lives, something was waiting. Something humanity had hidden from everyone, including its enemies. The first sign of trouble came when the alien war fleet crossed the outer border of the system. Thousands of kilometers away from Erebus 7, massive black ships moved through space like shadows. Their armor reflected the cold light of distant stars, and their weapons remained silent as they approached their target. The fleet belonged to the Varkun Dominion, an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds through fear and overwhelming force. Their commander, High Admiral Kalavos, looked at the holographic image of the human colony and smiled. "This is the human settlement?" he asked. A young officer beside him nodded. "Confirmed. Population estimate: less than 400,000. No orbital defense platforms detected. No active military presence. Their technology is outdated compared to ours." The admiral studied the planet carefully. "So the legends were true," he said. "Humanity sent its weakest people here and left them to die." The officers around him laughed. To the Varkun, Erebus 7 was not a threat. It was an opportunity. A forgotten colony filled with resources. A perfect example of human weakness. The Varkun Dominion had spent decades studying humanity. They knew humans were unpredictable, but they believed they understood their limits. Humans could build. Humans could adapt. Humans could survive. But humans without support from Earth? They believed those humans were harmless. They had no idea they were looking at the biggest mistake their empire had ever made. On the surface of Erebus 7, the people living in the colony continued their normal lives. The city of Haven's Reach looked nothing like a military world. There were no giant weapons, no massive walls, no armies marching through the streets. Children walked to school beneath artificial sunlight. Farmers worked the outer fields. Engineers repaired old machines that had been passed down through generations. To an outsider, it looked like a colony struggling to survive. And that was exactly what the colonists wanted everyone to believe. Deep beneath the city, however, a different world existed. Far below the ground, hidden behind layers of reinforced metal and ancient security systems, thousands of machines were waking up. For decades, the underground facility had remained completely silent. Waiting. A single human voice echoed through the massive command chamber. "Unknown fleet has entered the system." The room instantly came alive. Lights activated. Screens turned on. Old systems that had not moved in generations began running again. At the center of the chamber stood Commander Elias Vane, the leader of Erebus 7's hidden defense network. Unlike the other colonists, Elias knew the truth. The colony was never abandoned. It was never forgotten. Earth had not left them behind because they were weak. Earth had sent them away because they were important. The original settlers of Erebus 7 were not just farmers, engineers, and scientists. They were guardians. They had been given one mission: survive, wait, and protect what was hidden beneath their world until humanity needed it again. An officer approached Elias with concern. "Commander, the Varkun fleet is moving into attack position. Their numbers are far beyond anything we have faced before." Elias looked at the massive holographic display showing hundreds of alien warships surrounding the planet. For a moment, the room remained silent. Then he asked a simple question. "Did they detect the underground systems?" The officer checked the readings. "No, sir. They still believe we are defenseless." A small smile appeared on Elias's face. "Good." The officer looked confused. "Good." Elias turned toward the massive doors behind him. "Activate the old fleet." The entire chamber became silent. Everyone understood what those words meant. The old fleet. The ships that had not been seen for over a century. Ships that were considered myths even among humans. Because when the first settlers arrived on Erebus 7, they did not come alone. Hidden beneath the planet's surface were the last creations of humanity's golden military age. Warships built before Earth signed peace agreements with alien civilizations. Ships designed for one purpose only: to survive the impossible. Above the planet, the Varkoon prepared their invasion. Their commanders expected surrender within hours. They expected fear. They expected desperate humans begging for mercy. Instead, something strange happened. The planet below them went completely dark. Every city, every communication tower, every energy signal, gone. The Varkoon officers watched their screens in confusion. What happened? One asked. The admiral stepped forward. Perhaps their systems failed. But then the sensors detected something. A massive energy surge. Not from the surface. From beneath it. The planet itself began to shake. Deep underground, ancient doors thousands of meters wide slowly opened for the first time in generations. And from the darkness below Erebus 7, human warships began to rise. One after another. Silent. Powerful. Unstoppable. The Varkoon fleet watched as impossible shapes climbed into orbit. Huge battleships carrying technology that should have disappeared centuries ago. The alien officers stared in disbelief. Because the colony they came to conquer was not a forgotten human outpost. It was a hidden fortress. And the humans they believed were weak had been waiting for someone foolish enough to attack. The Varkoon Dominion had conquered planets for nearly 300 years. They had destroyed civilizations that were considered more advanced than humanity. They had faced alien armies with millions of soldiers. They had never once experienced fear from a simple colony. But now, as hundreds of massive human warships emerged from beneath Erebus 7, the bridge of the Varkoon flagship became completely silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Because every sensor in the fleet was reporting the same impossible information. The human colony had a military force. And it was larger than anything the Varkoon had expected. High Admiral Kayla Voss stared at the holographic display in front of him. "How many ships?" he finally asked. The officer operating the sensors looked nervous. "Initial count shows over 300 active vessels, Admiral." The room went quiet again. 300. Voss repeated. "Yes, sir." The Admiral stepped closer to the display. "That is impossible. Their population is less than 500,000. They could never build a fleet of this size." The officer hesitated before answering. "Perhaps they did not build it recently." That sentence changed the atmosphere on the bridge. Because everyone understood what it meant. The fleet had been waiting. The Varkoon had not discovered a weak colony. They had discovered a sleeping weapon. Meanwhile, inside the command center beneath Erebus 7, Commander Elias Vane watched the alien fleet surrounding the planet. The humans around him were not celebrating. They knew this moment was coming. For generations, their ancestors had prepared for this day. The hidden fleet was not created because humanity wanted another war. It was created because humanity understood something most civilizations learned too late. Peace was only valuable when someone was strong enough to protect it. An officer approached Elias. "Commander, the fleet is fully activated. The first battle group is ready for deployment." Elias nodded. "Open communication channels." A message appeared across every screen on the Varkoon ships. For the first time in over 100 years, humanity spoke to the galaxy from Erebus 7. The Varkoon expected a frightened voice. They expected a desperate request for negotiation. Instead, they heard calm confidence. "This is Commander Elias Vane of the Erebus Defense Fleet." The alien bridge officers listened carefully. "You have entered protected human territory without authorization." Admiral Voss laughed when he heard the message. A colony commander was threatening him? "Human commander," Voss replied, "you appear to misunderstand your situation. Your planet is surrounded by the military forces of the Varkoon Dominion." Elias remained silent for a moment. Then he answered, "No, you misunderstand yours." The Admiral frowned. "You believe these old ships can defeat us?" Elias looked at the fleet around him. They are not old. He paused. They are patient. The Varkoon officers did not understand the meaning behind those words. But soon they would. The human ships were unlike anything the Dominion had studied. Their designs were not elegant. They were not built for appearance. They looked heavy, powerful, and almost impossible to destroy. Massive armored carriers protected smaller attack vessels. Long-range battleships carried weapons systems that the Varkoon database had never recorded. These were not ships built for quick victories. They were ships built to survive years of war. The reason was simple. When Earth created the Erebus fleet, humanity knew it might one day lose contact with the colony. So they designed ships that could operate independently. No supply lines. No outside support. No assistance. Only humans, their machines, and their determination. The Varkoon had expected isolated settlers. They found the last guardians of an ancient human military tradition. But Admiral Voss refused to believe it. "Prepare attack formations," he ordered. His officers looked uncertain. "Admiral, should we reconsider? We have limited information about their capabilities." Voss turned sharply. "Are you questioning my command?" "No, Admiral." "Then follow orders." The Varkoon fleet began moving into formation. Their strategy was simple. Overwhelm the humans with numbers. They had nearly 600 ships. The humans had around 300. The Varkoon believed that mathematics would decide the battle. But they had forgotten one thing. Humanity had never depended only on numbers. The first Varkoon attack wave moved forward. Thousands of missiles launched toward Erebus 7. The planet's surface shook as people watched the sky fill with enemy weapons. But before the missiles could reach their target, the human fleet moved. Not quickly. Not desperately. Calmly. The front line of human battleships activated their defensive systems. A massive energy shield formed around the planet. The Varkoon weapons struck. Explosions covered space. For several seconds, the aliens believed they had damaged the human defenses. Then the smoke cleared. The shield was still standing. And the human ships had not fired a single shot. The Varkoon bridge became confused. "Why aren't they attacking?" an officer asked. Admiral Voss watched the silent human fleet. He realized something was wrong. The humans were not trying to win quickly. They were waiting. "They are studying us," he whispered. The officer looked at him. "Admiral." Voss stared at the human warships. For the first time in decades, the Varkoon commander felt something he had forgotten. Uncertainty. Because the greatest danger was not the fleet they could see. It was the possibility that the humans had revealed only a small part of their strength. And deep beneath Erebus 7, hidden systems were still activating. More ancient ships were waking. More weapons were coming online. The Varkoon invasion had begun with confidence. But now, the galaxy was about to witness something it had not seen in centuries. Humanity returning to the battlefield. The first battle had not even truly started. Yet the Varkoon Dominion was already questioning everything they believed about humanity. For centuries, they had studied human expansion across the galaxy. They knew humans were stubborn. They knew humans were creative. They knew humans could survive in places where other species would fail. But the Varkoon believed they also knew humanity's greatest weakness. Humans cared too much about protecting what they built. They believed humans would always choose peace over power. They were wrong. Because the humans of Erebus 7 had learned a lesson from history. Sometimes, the only way to protect peace was to make sure enemies feared the cost of destroying it. Inside the underground command facility, Commander Elias Vane watched the battle data flowing across the screens. The Varkoon fleet had not retreated. Instead, they were preparing for a larger attack. An officer looked worried. "Commander, they are reorganizing their entire formation. Their next strike will be stronger." Elias nodded. "They expected us to surrender after their first attack failed." "Yes, sir. And now they are trying to understand why we didn't." The officer looked at the massive fleet surrounding the planet. "Do you think they know what is coming?" Elias looked toward the ceiling, as if he could see beyond the kilometers of rock above them. No. He paused. And that is why we still have the advantage. For generations, the people of Erebus 7 had protected their secret. The hidden fleet was not the only thing buried beneath the planet. The colony itself had been built around an ancient military installation, a place known as the Vault. The Vault was created during humanity's first major conflict with alien civilizations. It contained technology that had been considered too dangerous to share. Advanced navigation systems, experimental defense networks, and the greatest achievement of human engineering from that era, the ability to create ships that could remain hidden for centuries. When Earth sent the first settlers to Erebus 7, they gave them a responsibility. Not to conquer, not to expand, to protect. The colony became humanity's silent guardian at the edge of the galaxy. And now, after 200 years of waiting, that responsibility had returned. Above the planet, the Varkun fleet began its second attack. This time, they moved differently. Their largest battleships advanced first, using their heavy armor as protection. Behind them, thousands of smaller attack vessels prepared to strike weak points in the human defenses. The Varkun believed they had found the perfect strategy. Overwhelm the humans. Break their formation. Force them to surrender. But the human fleet did not react with panic. Instead, the ships moved into position with perfect coordination. The Varkun commanders noticed something strange. The human fleet was not behaving like a force that had been hidden away for centuries. They moved like soldiers who had been fighting together for generations. Because they had. Every officer on those ships had trained from childhood. Every pilot knew the history of the fleet. Every crew member understood their mission. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting because their home had been threatened. The Varkun weapons fired. Space became filled with energy blasts and explosions. The human shields absorbed the first wave. Then the human fleet finally answered. A single command was sent across the entire formation. Begin defensive response. Thousands of human weapons activated at once. But instead of targeting enemy ships randomly, the fleet focused on specific points. Power systems, communication arrays, navigation centers. The Varkun ships were not destroyed immediately. They were disabled. The alien commanders were confused. They are not trying to kill us, one officer asked. Admiral Voss watched the battle unfold. The humans had the ability to destroy many of their ships. But they weren't doing it. They were showing restraint. And somehow, that frightened him more. Because it meant humanity was not fighting out of desperation. They were fighting with control. They are sending a message, Voss said quietly. The officer looked at him. What message? The admiral stared at the human fleet. That they could have ended this already. On Erebus 7, civilians watched the battle from underground shelters. Many of them had never seen the fleet before. They had grown up believing their planet was simply a forgotten colony. Now they discovered the truth. Their ancestors had not been abandoned. They had been trusted. A young engineer named Mara Voss stood beside her family as the images appeared on the shelter screens. Why didn't Earth tell us? She asked. Her father looked at the human ships fighting above them. Because if everyone knew what was here, everyone would have come looking. Mara understood. The secret protected them. The silence protected them. The forgotten colony was forgotten by design. But now the galaxy would know. The Varkun invasion had revealed the truth. Humanity still had teeth. And those teeth had been hidden in the darkness for a very long time. As the second attack failed, Admiral Voss received a new report. One that made his confidence disappear completely. A sensor officer approached him slowly. Admiral, we have detected additional energy signatures. Voss turned. From where? The officer swallowed. From beneath the planet. The bridge went silent. How many? The officer looked at the numbers appearing on the screen. We don't know. Why not? The officer looked terrified. Because the systems are still waking up. Far below Erebus 7, ancient doors continued opening. More ships began rising. More weapons came online. The Varkoon had arrived expecting a forgotten colony. Instead, they had awakened something that had been sleeping since the early days of humanity. And now the galaxy was about to learn the truth. The most dangerous human weapon was not the fleet in orbit. It was the reason that fleet had been created. The Varkoon Dominion had entered the Erebus system believing they were hunting a weak and forgotten human colony. Instead, they had discovered something far more dangerous. A secret humanity had protected for generations. A hidden force that had been waiting in silence. And now, as more human warships emerged from beneath Erebus 7, the entire balance of power in the galaxy began to change. On the bridge of the Varkoon flagship, High Admiral Kayla Voss stared at the endless stream of new sensor reports. The numbers continued rising. More human ships. More weapons systems. More energy signatures. For the first time in his military career, the Varkoon commander did not know what his enemy was capable of. "How many vessels are active now?" he asked. The sensor officer hesitated. "Over 700 confirmed ships, Admiral." The room became silent. 700. A force larger than many major planetary defenses in the galaxy. And it had been hidden under a colony that everyone believed was powerless. Voss slowly looked at the planet below. The small cities. The quiet landscapes. The ordinary human population. Everything about Erebus 7 had been a carefully created illusion. "Send a priority message to command," he ordered. The communication officer looked surprised. "What should we report?" The Admiral remained silent for a moment. Then he spoke. "Report that humanity was never as weak as we believed." Meanwhile, inside the Human Command Center, Commander Elias Vane watched the Varkoon fleet begin to lose confidence. The battle was changing. Not because the humans had more ships. Not because their weapons were stronger. But because the enemy had finally understood something important. The humans were not fighting to survive. They were fighting because they had already survived. An officer approached Elias. "Commander, several Varkoon vessels are attempting to withdraw." Elias looked at the tactical display. "Let them." The officer looked confused. "Sir, we did not activate the fleet to destroy them." Elias turned toward the screen showing the enemy ships. "We activated it so they would understand." The human commanders had no desire to become another empire that ruled through fear. Their mission was not revenge. It was protection. For generations, Erebus 7 had stayed hidden because humanity knew what happened when powerful technology fell into the wrong hands. The fleet beneath the planet was not a weapon of conquest. It was a warning. A reminder that humanity would not allow anyone to erase its future. The Varkoon fleet began retreating from attack positions. But Admiral Voss was not ready to accept defeat. His pride fought against reality. He had built his entire career on the belief that fear controlled the galaxy. Every civilization they had attacked had surrendered after seeing the size of the Varkoon fleet. But humans were different. They did not surrender. They did not panic. They simply stood there, waiting. The Admiral opened a direct communication channel. "I want to speak with your commander." Moments later, Elias Vane appeared on the screen. Two leaders from different civilizations looked at each other. One represented an empire that had spent centuries taking worlds. The other represented a forgotten colony that had spent centuries preparing. "You surprised us, human," Voss admitted. Elias remained calm. "You surprised us too." The Admiral frowned. "How?" "Because you actually believed we were gone." For a moment, neither side spoke. Then Voss asked the question that had been troubling him. "Why hide this fleet?" Elias looked toward the planet below. "Because power attracts attention. And attention creates conflict." The Admiral studied him. "You allowed the galaxy to believe you were weak." Elias nodded. "Yes." "Why?" The human commander answered without hesitation. "Because those who seek weakness usually reveal themselves." The words stayed with Voss. Because he understood what Elias meant. The Varkoon had not discovered Erebus 7 by accident. They had searched for isolated worlds. Worlds that could not call for help. Worlds that looked vulnerable. They had targeted the colony because they thought no one would defend it. But they had misunderstood humanity completely. The colony was not waiting for rescue. The colony was the rescue. Across the galaxy, the Varkoon invasion signals had already been detected. Other civilizations watched the battle through hidden observation networks. They had expected another human defeat. Instead, they saw something impossible. A forgotten human colony forcing one of the galaxy's strongest empires to retreat. Old stories about humanity began spreading again. Stories from centuries ago. Stories about human explorers who crossed impossible distances. Stories about human soldiers who refused to surrender. Stories about a species that always survived. Many civilizations had forgotten those stories. Now they remembered. The human name was no longer connected with weakness. It was connected with resilience. As the Varkoon fleet prepared to leave the system, Admiral Voss received one final transmission from Erebus 7. It was not a threat. It was not an insult. It was a warning. This colony was forgotten once. Elias's voice echoed across the communication channel. But humanity remembers everything. The Varkoon ships disappeared into hyperspace. But their defeat traveled faster than they did. And soon, every major power in the galaxy would know what had happened. A forgotten human colony had awakened. A hidden fleet had returned. And humanity had reminded the universe of a truth it had tried to forget. You could ignore humans. You could underestimate humans. But you should never assume humans were finished. Deep beneath Erebus 7, the ancient fleet remained active. Because Commander Elias Vane knew this battle was not the end. It was only the beginning. The galaxy had finally noticed humanity again. And this time, humanity was ready. End of section 4. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more HFY adventures among the stars.